All right, look on page 93. Ron's rules for hard money. I've already covered it. What is it? Borrow more than you need. If you don't borrow more than you need, you're putting yourself at peril, because when things go wrong, and they always do, now you have to come out of pocket, and some of you cannot afford to come out of pocket for long to support these properties, especially when you're dealing in millions. In case you haven't figured it out, go figure out what the monthly payment is on a $5 million loan at any rate of interest and see if it excites you a whole lot. Okay, remember, we're in the big leagues now, and you don't want to be trying to take this out of your $50,000 a year income to pay this payment on this, so you got to make sure there's enough money there and that you're dealing from reality, not from la-la land. On page 94, what do mortgage brokers and lenders charge? The answer, every dime they can get, that they can get you to accept. Now, just for the record, it is all negotiable. It is all negotiable. And here's what it amounts to. They're going to charge you what they want to charge you, based on what the market will pay. And if you want to pay it, fine, you pay it. If you don't want to pay it, you move on. You get to choose the same as they get to choose. It has to work for both of you. But what I don't want you to do is get hung up on the cost so much. Some of you will work a month to shave 0.5% off of an interest rate and lose focus of what's real. What's real is that you get the deal done and you make money on it. You focus more on cost control than you do on revenue. And your job is to focus on revenue. And you do that by creating the deals. Cost control is okay, but there's a point to where you just have to say good enough is good enough. And if you're going to spend all of your time shopping around for the best deal on the planet, what are you taking time away from doing? Shopping around for the best property deal on the planet, not the best loan deal. In fact, if you're going to work with a mortgage broker, that's their job. You know, he's going to bring you the best deal that he can get you based on what he's got to work with. Because if he doesn't, you're not going to come back to him very often. And you got to let him do his job. It's really that simple. Now, what do you think they should charge? Look in the middle of page 94. And this is just a rule of thumb. Hard money, 1 to 3 points to the broker plus the lender's fees. What are the lender's fees? Beats the heck out of me. And whatever they want to charge based on the type of loan. And by the way, are they going to vary all across the board? Yeah, I've seen some guys who charge money that would absolutely make you want to choke. Choke. You talk about hard money. This is hard money. I mean, I've seen guys charge 10 points up front, 19% interest, and 10 points on the back end. You don't like them rates? Well, think about it, though, just for the heck of it. Think about this. You won't pay 10 points on the front, and you won't pay 19% interest, and you won't pay 10 points on the back, but you'll go find a partner and give up 50% of the deal to them. What kind of justification is that? I don't know. Now, obviously, you might be looking for something from that partner in addition to just putting up the money. In my case, you can't possibly do the deal without me anyway, so I'm not worried about it. When I first started borrowing money on residential houses back in 1982, I was paying 10 points, 18% interest, and 6 months prepayment penalty. Because that's all I could get. Credit sucked, broke, bankrupt, that's all I could get. So I borrowed that money because every time I borrowed it, I go do a deal, I do a house, and I flip it, and I make $15,000, $20,000. It didn't take me long to figure out that money was cheaper than having a partner put up the money I needed and then get half the profits. Well, obviously, you guys don't have to pay those rates because the market dictates what you have to pay. Even hard money lenders have to be competitive in order to get the deal. Great, they got money. Well, big deal. Money's everywhere. They still have to have a marketplace for the money. So you don't have to pay those rates. But you need to get hung up less on what the money costs and more on the availability of it. Now, look, I'm cost prone just like you are. I don't have to pay those kind of rates. I don't have to pay 10 points to get a loan done. I don't have to pay 15% interest. So I'm not. But if it's a difference between doing the deal and not doing it, and that's the only place to get the money, right, you got to make a decision. Do I want this big old huge profit bad enough to pay these rates that make me want to throw up? Now, when you become the hard money lenders, which I hope you all will, you're going to have an opposite point of view of that, aren't you?
That's right.
I think we probably covered that subject good enough. You're going to pay whatever you have to pay. How long should you expect it to take to close a loan? I'm going to let Brandon handle this one.
Yeah, and really this depends on the type of financing that you're getting and the type of property that it is. In hard money, I've seen deals done in a week. Typically you want to plan on 3 to 4 because you have to allow enough time to have the due diligence done. And permanent financing can take anywhere from 60 to 180 days. I mean, we're doing deals now that are going to take more than 180 days, but they're $200 million. Those take a long time to fund. There's a lot of steps involved and a lot of approvals that we've got to get.
And usually several players involved.
Oh, well, I mean, that deal,
Yeah.
That's the Chinese government that's guaranteeing part of the loan. I mean, that's complex. On the types of transactions that you're going to be doing, though, it sounds like there's a lot of development and construction type of loans out there that you guys are looking at. Those take longer as well. We've got to get the construction cost breakdowns. You've got to know exactly how much each line item is going to cost you to build that development. You've got to have all of the approvals in place. I mean, don't send in a package to a mortgage broker or a lender unless you've got approval to do what you want to do. Because otherwise you're wasting their time and wasting your time, and you won't keep that relationship for long. So hopefully a good mortgage broker will help guide you through that process, because the reality is you're probably not doing it intentionally, but just because you don't know better. So what we do is help guide people through that process, but it takes time to get these deals done. Now, obviously, hard money loans have a lot shorter fuse. It doesn't take as long to get those deals done because the lenders aren't as picky. They're not looking at the cash flow at all, most likely, although some do. It depends, again, on that spectrum of lenders that you're dealing with. But you need to make sure if you're doing a construction and development loan, you've got to allow enough time for you to do your diligence, for the broker to do their due diligence, and the lender to do theirs. So it really depends on the transaction.
Actually, it has a lot to do with how far you are along in that process before you apply for the loan.
That's true.
If you are at the end of that process because you know what he's going to want before he wants it, then frankly the time is relatively short for you to get the loan closed. Mm-hmm. If you're not at the end of that process, that process has got to end during your application time. Then it feels like it's dragging on forever. The loan's not dragging on forever. Getting the work done to get ready for the loan is dragging on forever. It doesn't take a lender long to decide if they're going to do the loan or not if they got the stuff in front of them that they need to make that decision. And it doesn't take them long to close after they make that decision. It's getting the stuff. That's a lender's nightmare. Get me a package that's got what I need in it and make my life easy. Don't make me work so hard.
Amen. I mean, take the time to complete a package so that you've got everything in there up front. If you do that, you'll develop a very strong relationship with the broker that you're working with, because they will love seeing packages from you rather than the piecemeal packages that they get and feeling like they have to, pull people's teeth to get the information from them.
So I guess we probably ought to discuss what goes in the packages too, wouldn't you think?
We should, but let me make one last comment, which is that there's nothing more frustrating from our end than asking for documentation and having it take weeks to come back to us. And then at the end of the process, you come back to us and you say, "Why is it taking you so damn long to get this done?" Maybe because you took so damn long to get us the documentation. I mean, I've had clients...
Oh, no. It's all your fault.
Yeah, I know.
We need somebody to blame.
That's
it,
true.
man.
Okay, sounds good.
That's
let's
it.
Talk about what goes in a package.
First, let's talk about commercial underwriting guidelines as a general rule. This on page 97 is how deals get financed. Basically, it's the criteria that lenders are going to look at, because a different type of commercial properties look at them a different way. Apartments and office buildings are always going to be based on their cash flow, their net operating income. That's the main thing. The property has to support the debt and then some. If it doesn't, you're not going to get the money borrowed, unless you can show the lender that very quickly it will. When you're borrowing money on construction projects, though, obviously there is no cash flow. So the loan is going to be on what is now, what will be, and here's what it costs to get us to where it will be. It's going to be based on future value as well as the cost to get it there. And the loan is going to be based largely on those costs not to exceed a percentage of that future value. So loan to value is going to come into play as well as cost. And loan to value will be based on future value. Raw land, loan to value. What else have they got the loan on? There is no cash flow. And so it's a loan to value ratio loan if it's just raw land. And mobile home parks, it's actually mostly cash flow if they're operating. But frankly, what is a mobile home park if it has no income? Raw land. So very well may be based on raw land if it's a mobile home park that is not ready to take out with a permanent finance loan.
Yeah, I was just going to add, cash flow is king. In commercial, a lot of you are making the transition from residential or 1 to 4 unit properties into commercial. It's a whole different world. The biggest change is, in residential, lenders aren't looking at the cash flow. Some are, obviously, on some smaller units. But in commercial, it's all about cash flow. Cash flow is king. And you don't want to take on a project that's not going to cash flow unless it's got a problem with it that you're going to fix. But by the time we go to a permanent permanent solution, which is what we're talking about here in commercial underwriting guidelines, at that point, it's got a cash flow.
And that's your job. Buy them with a problem, fix problem, then refinance them. Yep.
Question on raw land. Does it matter where it's at in the phase of development as much as they're going to lend on? For example, if it's in raw land and maybe you're putting in utilities, is there a difference on what a lender's going to lend based on where you're at in the process of building out the lots?
It depends on whether we're talking hard money or commercial, because there is commercial money out there for raw land. But in that case, then typically, they want to see utilities in place. Okay. Because you're going to show that you're going to develop that land.
Right.
They're not going to just, they'll lend you money on just land, on dirt if you want to sit on it, but not very attractive.
Well, I think what she's saying is, do you have to have the utilities in place before they close the loan? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I think the difference of how much money they're going to lend or the percentage based on how far along in the process.
They're going to lend you based on, A, the value after it's completed, and B, the cost to get it completed.
Okay.
They can lend you up to 100% of those costs, which includes the purchase price of the land.
Okay.
But still, it can't exceed a loan-to-value ratio, which is usually about 75% of the total after done value. Sometimes they'll loan you 100% of what you need.
Okay.
But it's still not going to go over 75% of what the total is worth. But they will close the loan, and the first draw is to take out the land.
Okay.
And then they will extend draws based on your schedule, which you will have prior to getting the loan. And they release that money just like you're building a house.
Okay.
That's all it is. Look at it like a house building loan. As you get the job done, they release the money.
Great.
Okay. Loan proposals. Next page. There's a loan proposal and then there's a loan commitment. You very likely won't get a loan commitment until you have a loan proposal. Here's step 1. Find deal. Step 2. Fund deal with private money if it's, let's say you're going for hard money. Even with hard money, you have a loan proposal and you have a loan commitment. Okay? Step 2, figure out what you want to borrow. Contact mortgage broker. Mortgage broker contacts lender. Lender creates loan proposal, which basically is an offer that has plenty of flexibility in it. You like or don't like loan proposal. If you like loan proposal, you sign and send back. You're under no obligation when you sign a loan proposal. Sometimes the loan proposal will tell you we need a little bit of money up front if we want to move forward from this point. If that's the case, you sign the loan proposal, you're going to need to send the money up front. In fact, how much money, I don't know. You tell us. On a hard money loan, what would be the point to where I'd want to put the caution flag up?
I think it depends again on the size of the transaction and the complexity of it. If you're talking raw land, you shouldn't be over, $5,000 or so. If you're talking about some mega office building that's going to take a lot of time and energy to appraise, hard money lender still has to figure out what that office building or hotel is worth. And so
I don't know that's true because we're going to wind up getting an appraisal in here. That's true. The money you're extending is not for the appraisal normally. It's for the visit to the property more than anything else. Wouldn't you agree? So I would think, 10,000 max, 5,000. In fact, 5,000 is kind of the norm. Sometimes it's less. It's just for a visit to the property and a little bit of time spent on it. And then, of course, when we get into the appraisal stuff here, then we're going to have to spend more money on that and more money on the phase one and anything else that we need to spend money on to get our due diligence done. But it starts with a loan proposal. Here's what we think we can do for you based on our due diligence. If you like it, you sign it, you send it back. Then, and by the way, you won't get a loan proposal until after you get a broker agreement signed. So step one, get broker agreement signed. If you can get through that without gagging, then you tell a broker, just kidding, tell a broker, okay, go for it. Now, broker gets you a loan proposal, and the broker normally, in my experience, normally the loan proposal comes from the lender. Your experience, true or false?
It depends. I mean, often we will customize the letter of intent or
You'll
the loan
take their proposal and put it on your letterhead so we don't know who the lender is.
You got it.
Okay, good. All right.
That's what we do. I mean, any smart broker does the same thing.
I can see you were struggling for a way to present that. All right.
That's all right.
But all he does is carbon copy what he got. And incidentally, if the lender is not that concerned about getting Brandon paid. Brandon's got to take care of that himself. So the lender sends in and says they want 3 points. Well, his loan proposal to you to say they want 5 points, whatever. But he's got to build in there. Or he'll say, I want 2 points plus what the lender wants or whatever he wants. That's what mood he's in today. All right, next page of 99, loan application. Now that's going to be a pretty important page to you because really, literally, this is a checklist of stuff you need to be prepared to send to a lender. And take a look at it. At the top, these things you're going to need in all loans, give or take. Now, not all loans, but most loans. I mean, they're going to want your tax returns and your financial statements. And by the way, if you think most of the hard money you borrow, especially on these smaller deals, don't be surprised now when they ask you to personally guarantee it. Now, I work hard not to get it personally guaranteed, but I got a strong financial statement. Plus, I got low loan-to-value ratios. If that's not the case, sorry, got to break my rules. 3, year-to-date profit and loss. In other words, they want to know what you're worth and what you make. Personal financial statement, loan request. In other words, here's what I want, and here's what I'm going to do with the money. You could do this is one piece of paper. The loan request and the use of proceeds. The broker will guide you and get you a format that they want to see you present that in, and if you just give the broker the information, they're going to present that same piece of paper or prepare that same piece of paper for the lender anyway. So look, if you're going to apply for loans, hard money or other, you might as well get this stuff together. So if you hadn't filed your tax returns in 4 years, you're probably not the one that needs to submit for the loan, Now, don't get me wrong. My tax returns are never filed until October. I haven't filed a tax return before October in 20 years. In fact, I don't know anybody files them in April. I file mine in October. So I'm not going to have 2004's tax returns till October. But does that mean that a lender's not going to want to know what happened in 2004 in my life? Of course they do. So, they get a statement of income and expense, a P&L statement for 2004. And if you can't produce this stuff, he ain't going to make it up for you. So you might as well get that stuff ready before you go applying for a loan. And if you can't produce it because you don't have it or you don't like what it says, then you might as well be asking yourself, well, who else is going to go get this loan besides me? Because it don't look like I'm going to be able to get it.
Yeah, and if you're self-employed, they're going to ask for a year-to-date profit and loss and balance sheet as well. So even though, yes, we want to know what happened last year, we also want to know what's happening now. Because, there may have been some major adverse change in your business in the last 3 months where your income's gone like this. Or it may be just the opposite. It may be that your income is starting to skyrocket. Now, understand, a lender, an underwriter, is not going to give you as much credit on a P&L and balance sheet as tax returns. Right? Big difference. P&L and balance sheet are not audited by anyone. They're not turned in to any other agency other than the lender. So they're going to give the most weight to your tax returns. They're going to have you sign typically a 4506, an IRS form that allows them to verify those tax returns with the IRS should they choose to at any time, and usually those will say up to 2 or 3 years down the road. So you need to be prepared for that. But just understand that they're going to want to know current information as well as what happened last year.
Now, given that we said that, if you're going in for hard money, please don't assume that if you don't have a good financial statement and you're not exactly thrilled about what your financial situation looks like, that does not mean you can't get hard money. But it does mean you better not be real picky about the rate, number one. And you better have a good low loan-to-value loan so that the lender can be convinced that the property will support this debt if you crap out on them. And I mean, I've seen a lot of people get hard money loans that have not good financial statements. I mean, that's the definition of hard money.
Why you're getting it?
In my opinion, a hard money loan needs to be based on the collateral or it's not hard money. But still, the lender has got to have got a right to know if they're going to get paid back or not. All right, let's move down the list. Existing multifamily or office or retail or industrial. There's a simple list. Anybody making a loan on a property is going to want to know the financial data concerning that property, and that's nothing more than income, expenses, and net NOI, net operating income. I want to know what it is now, if it's going to be different. If I'm trying to get a loan, a hard money loan, and it sucks now, then put in a sucky pro forma. But then I want to know, okay, you borrow this money, now what is it going to be like shortly? Now show me a reasonable pro forma to show me where the cash flow is coming from after you buy this property and get it fixed. And then also show me your exit strategy. Every lender always wants to know the exit strategy. And you better have an answer when you get asked that question. Well, how are you going to pay this back? Well, I don't know. You know, if I get a raise, maybe I'll ask my mother-in-law for it. I don't know. A survey if available. Quite often you can get a survey that comes with the deal that the seller's got sometime in the past. If you've got a survey, you may not need to get a new one, or you may, depending on the lender. But if you've got one, go ahead and submit it with the package. If it's free, just ask for it. Actual income and expenses, as well as projected. Executive summary of your plans for project and how you'll pay back the money, your history, and other pertinent facts. Imagine yourself sitting there. Imagine yourself, the one getting these property information sheets here, and trying to figure out what this deal is all about. Here's what it's got to look like, guys. This piece of paper, and I mean one sheet of paper, has got to tell me the entire story at a glance. Here's what the property is. Here's what I want to borrow. Here's what the plan for the property is. And here's the exit strategy. Remember what I told you about the lender I had dinner with a couple nights ago, Tessa? You know, your thing was so easy to read, I didn't have much work to do. You remember that. You're writing these up in third grade language to present so that someone who has absolutely no experience or clue what this project is about can read it and get a Reader's Digest version of it. The same way I want you. That's why you are to present me only these property information sheets. You are not to present one of these till I get one of these. Because you may not get past this stage. And if you don't get past this stage, I don't want all that crap. And the lender don't want all that crap either till they ask for it. And then they only want what they want. You would be appalled to see some of the crap people send us on these deals. I can't imagine why they think we'd want this junk. We got a package the other day. 34 pages come across my fax machine on one deal, one project. Probably 12 of them were photographs. How does a photograph look when it's faxed? Great big black blob. Exactly. There were information in this 34 pages that I don't ever want to know about this property. Even if I own it, I don't care about this crap. There was stuff in this package about what the Indians did to this property in 1862. I don't care. I only want to know what I want to know. And I'm telling you, the easier you make it for them to get through this information, the quicker you're going to get your approval. And if they have to work too hard, what's the natural human thing to do? Find a reason to stop the pain. Say no. Down to raw land. It's pretty much the same thing, except in raw land, if you're going in for permanent financing, you've got to have a site plan, a drawing. What are we going to put on this raw land? And even if you're going in for not so permanent financing, it's still nice if the lender could see what the plan is for this raw land. In fact, they're going to want to see what the plan is for this raw land. If you got a survey, put it in there. If you got an aerial photograph, those go a long ways. You can look at an aerial photograph and see what's going on around the property. You can see lowlands sometimes. And that's like looking at a photograph of a house. Give me a photograph of a house, and then, it's a giant leap. Put it on black ink on white paper, and there's still a lot of question in my mind. Photographs. You see me put some photographs up here of projects. Appraisal if it's available. And we're going to discuss that because it may or may not be available. If it's available, it's because you ordered it before you applied for the loan. Certainly photographs if they're not available. Phase 1. Phase 1 is going to be done on a commercial property before you close a loan. It is going to be done even if the lender doesn't want it done. You do. And we're going to discuss that. A phase 1 is an environmental study to make sure you don't get stuck cleaning up some property you bought because it's got poison that you didn't have anything to be put there to do with putting there, but you're responsible because you happen to be the owner of the week. Mobile home parks. Mobile home parks are cash flow. Show the cash flow. Show the P&L. Show the new P&L once you do what you're going to do. Survey. Here's the P&L. Here's the income. Here's what I'm going to do to fix the income. Here's what it's going to look like when I'm get done. Here's how long it's going to take. Here's how much money I need to get it there. And down at the bottom, take a look. You can submit Brandon as much junk as you want. He's got a big trash can. Brandon then will decide what pieces of this he needs to take out of here that he thinks the lender wants to see. So what I would do if I were you is I would contact the mortgage broker, and then I would say, please get me a list of what you want. And then give him what he wants. And frankly, don't give him any more than he asks for. Just give him what he wants. And if he wants more, he'll ask for more. But you give it to him promptly. And if you don't have it, you tell him I don't have it, but I'll go get it.
I want to circle back to one item on here, which is the actual income and expenses. What we're looking for is tax returns from the seller. If you're buying a property, we want to know what the property has done historically. Now, this shouldn't be news, but you want to know what the property has done historically. And if your seller is unwilling to give you tax returns on a property, an income-producing property that you're buying, that might be a red flag. Now, maybe that's a good sign because you guys are opportunists, right? So you want those wounded ducks, but you need to ask that point because that could be a negotiating point. That might give you the leverage that you need to get a better deal.
Yes, when it's applicable. If I got an apartment complex that's 30% occupied, I don't know what the tax returns are going to tell me, except the income sucked. And the NOI, there wasn't any.
They'll tell you true expenses is one of the things that we look
perhaps.
at.
I guess they would tell me that.
I mean, you're not going to, I suppose you could overinflate the expenses, but you're definitely going to write off any expenses that you have. So
on the other side of that, when I see the income on a tax return from a project, I know they're all lying. I know they're stealing money. So I know there's more income there somewhere. I just got to find the hole it went into. Because, when projects get into problems, quite often, what's the reason for that? Owner siphoning off money, to support his mistress, or his boat, or whatever else, or drugs,
his
or
hawker,
whatever else.
Got to pay for all that fuel somehow, Ron.
That's correct. Let's look at page 100. Let's talk about the ratios. Now, this is a very, very, very important session on financing. And you guys must understand the ratios lenders are looking for. And incidentally, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there aren't questions on the test concerning ratios. There's 3 biggies. Loan-to-value ratio, that is going to be a concern for any kind of loan, temporary or permanent, on any kind of project. Loan-to-value is always going to come into play. And everybody in this room knows what loan-to-value is. Debt ratio. Now that is your personal debt ratio. That is applicable when it's a small enough loan to where your personal situation is applicable. Larger projects, your personal debt ratio is irrelevant. Smaller projects, it isn't. And then, of course, debt coverage ratio. That one is critical when you're financing income-producing projects. And so we got to go over these, and you got to make sure you understand why these ratios are important, how to factor them in when you're applying for financing. And in this case, we're talking about permanent financing. Frankly, a hard money lender is not too concerned about the debt coverage ratio, but they are definitely concerned about the loan-to-value ratio. A permanent lender is really concerned about debt coverage ratio, and in fact is the number one determining factor to determine how much they're going to lend. Loan-to-value ratio on the next page. I guess anybody not know what that means? Well, good. Then we can just skip that one, can't we? Just keep in mind now that loan-to-value ratio includes all the mortgages, not just one mortgage. So if I've got a $100,000 property and I got a $40,000 first and a $30,000 second, what's my loan-to-value ratio? 70%. What's the loan-to-value ratio on the first? 40%. What's the loan-to-value ratio on the second? 70%. Yes?
Yeah, often companies do use loan-to-value, but there's also loan-to-contract price. So if you're buying a property for $5 million and it's worth $8 million, when do lenders look at the purchase price and when do they look at the whole value of the property?
Well, that's a good question of which we are already programmed to answer here. In fact, we have already answered it, but I'll let Brandon answer it.
Yeah, just once again, if you're doing conventional financing, it's going to be the lower of the purchase price or the appraised value.
Isn't that the reason you need hard money lenders? A bank is going to loan on your purchase price, guys. I was just having a conversation with Nathan and David. You guys in here? Yes, sir. Would you stand up a minute? There they are, right back there. This is this project in Florida that I'm going to fund. Look, I'm paying $3 million for it. I'm going to borrow at least $4 million. And the broker's already got a loan working with a bank down there. Now, what did I tell you about that? Okay? I want them to surprise me and come back to me and tell me that a bank's going to loan me $4 million on this project. And then I'm going to have to come back in, change all this stuff, redo my manual.
I think you're safe. You're safe.
Just for the record, I'm not the least bit worried about it. See, the broker we got down there is already setting me up with a bank. And that would work if I had a subordinated second going back to the seller and they could justify it. That bank ain't going to make me a loan on that property. Because they just don't lend you more than you're paying for the property. They just don't. And if they did, they're outside of the normal parameters of a real estate loan. You know, they might. You know, the only reason they might look more at it more like a credit line than they do a regular normal loan. And so it's possible. So I'm going to let them go ahead and play with it. And besides, I'm learning new stuff too here. I want to see a bank loan me more than I'm paying as a purchase. I just want to see it. But I ain't holding my breath. And just for the record, I'm not going to wait on them. Now, of course, I will wait on them if they can make a decision real quick. But
they will make a decision real quick.
Yeah, they will make a decision. I don't think I like that answer.
Well, you know what the answer is. So.
Well, maybe. You never know, though.
Yeah, that's true.
But you also have to take in consideration that we're in a small community and they need development badly. And the bank needs development, and the bank needs to get the money out. And how many places have they got to put the money out in this area? You know, it's possible. Yeah. Besides, with the glut of money out there right now, it's possible they might just change the rules. And I am a strong borrower. That doesn't hurt anything. Right. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with the bank.
Compensating factor, incredibly low LTV.
Mm-hmm. It is an incredibly low LTV, but I'm telling you, that ain't enough for a bank.
But you're talking about an LTV in real world, not in banking terms. And we're talking the way that banks decide LTV is lower of purchase price. But I agree. I mean, this one especially has, if any deal is going to get a bank to fund more than the purchase price, it's this one, from what I understand.
Because everybody in this town knows everybody else.
Sure.
We'll see. We'll see.
It may be a political move.
Oh, it probably doesn't hurt either that the broker that's taking the loan to the bank pretty much,
I think you got something with the credit line.
well, he's running the airport and he's the president of the EDC. That doesn't hurt a bit.
There you go.
Besides, he's getting commission. That doesn't hurt a bit either. All right, back in the back.
Yeah, when you're doing these loan-to-value calculations, when you were talking about having a seller financing situation where the seller's taking back a subordinated second,
Yeah.
and then you're going out for hard money or other money on a first
Yeah.
with a perceived better, lower loan-to-value ratio, when you're not calculating these as being both the first and the second, so are you really ahead there?
There's actually a point of clarity we should make. I know Ron's got in the book that it's loan to value, add the first, the second, the third. The way we look at it is there's two things. There's the loan to value on the loan that we're doing, and then there's what we call the CLTV, the combined loan to value. So, for example, if you're asking a bank to do a 50% first, and you've got a seller to carry a 30% second, and you've got 20% down, then you've got a loan to value of 50%, which is what the bank's doing. You've got a combined loan to value of 80%, because that's the combined, all the mortgages, loan to value. So there's actually two different LTVs that we look at. Really, as far as conventional financing, some of the lenders we work with will allow a 90% combined loan to value, but we don't have any lenders that'll do 100% combined loan to value on the traditional, conventional lending side.
And will the hard money lenders go traditionally quite a bit more aggressive on the CLTV?
Yes, they will.
Okay, thank you.
Hard money lenders are looking for loan to value ratio, period. And frankly, it doesn't hurt their feelings when there's a big second above them. In fact, if I were the lender, I would like that. That's just another person protecting my interest. Take this project in Florida. See, we're paying cash for that property. That's why I don't believe the bank's going to do it. What if we were paying $3 million and the seller was subordinating $1.5 million of that? See, now it's an easy loan for the bank because they're loaning 50% LTV. But when they're loaning more than I'm paying, that's a tough one. That it? Go ahead. None?
What could happen in a project like that where it's a value of $11 million and you put a purchase price maybe $4 million and you get a credit for $1 million for cleanup or whatever, anything else? What would happen in that situation?
Well, that's what I'm doing. What do you mean what would happen?
Well, the purchase price on the contract would be $4 million and you're getting a credit for $1 million.
You mean from the seller?
Right.
So you're saying you're going to present a contract to a lender that says you're paying $4 million and the lender's not going to know the seller's rebating you back $1 million.
No, you're telling them you're getting $1 million credit.
Well,
but now your purchase price is $4 million.
If the lender is aware of that, no problem if they agree to it. If they're not aware of it, they call it lender fraud.
Well, and understand, a lender looks at that as a real purchase price of $3 million. I mean, even though it's got a $4 million plus $1 million credit, the actual price that you're paying for that is $3 million net. So that's how they're going to evaluate it.
But it may cost you the $1 million to clean up. The fact is,
I can't see where you accomplish anything by doing that. I don't care. The lender can still see what's being paid, period. If the lender's got a reason for doing that to make some kind of stringent criteria, they got great. But you don't accomplish anything. The lender still knows you're paying $3 million for the property. Done. Yes.
Wouldn't it be smart to pull money out of residential property and use that for your down payment versus going to hard money loan, if you can?
Well, certainly. If we covered that yesterday, remember? Borrow money on your current property, cover down payment on other property. Yeah, it's smart, as long as you're still getting a good deal on the property you're buying and the seller's financing the difference, of course.
And
yes.
from an investment strategy, I mean, I would urge all of you guys that are doing residential, which sounds like all of you, to take a look at that Wealth Builder program. I know Ron's group, markets that heavily. That's a great way to...
You're talking about the 1% loan, which is now up to about 1.5%?
Okay, well, I still have 1%. I actually have one lender that's coming out at 3/4. But
well, you might want to go home and check because this just happened.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Going back to the loan application, is it possible to do like stated income or no doc loans, and especially the bigger deals?
There are, absolutely. There are lenders that will do stated, we have conventional lenders that will do stated income type transactions. Obviously, the loan to value ratios come down because they're not going to lend as much. But remember, again, in commercial, we're not as concerned about your personal cash flow as the property's cash flow. If we're not going to know financial data on the property, then that loan to value is going to come way down because there's a lot of, now you're dealing with hard money. So if you're seeking conventional financing, there are lenders that will do it stated income where they're not concerned about your personal financials. You're going to pay a higher rate and you're going to get a lower loan to value, but there's a huge spread. Everything's out there. It's just a matter of how much you're going to have to pay to get it.
Thank you. If you're appraising at twice the purchase price, what are you to the borrower going to ask in terms of the paperwork? Are you going to ask what you're actually paying, or are you just going to ask the appraisal price?
Are you asking, will the broker and the lender want to know what you're paying if they're extending you purchase money mortgage?
Correct. Always.
How could they do it without not knowing?
Always have to have a sales contract.
Yeah.
If it's a purchase transaction, we have to know what the terms of that purchase are. Not only purchase price, but anything else that's applicable.
Some of them are going to want to know what you paid even if you're doing a refi.
All right. Will it make a difference if you pay all cash for the property and then you try to get a commercial loan? Will they lend you more than you paid cash for it?
It's going to be really determined by the debt coverage ratio. I mean, that's what's going to really determine how much they're going to lend.
How you bought it has nothing to do with how much they're going to lend. In fact, you scare me, man, when you say, I assume you mean your cash.
Right.
Whew. So, well, you better make darn sure you understand the term due diligence before you go writing a check to pay cash for a property, especially a commercial property. Remember, it's buyer beware. Caveat emptor. Remember my story about lead-based paint now, or asbestos, and phase 1 environmental. You scare me when you're going to write a big check to buy a property unless you've got good legal representation all the way through. But anyway, that wasn't your question. Let's move on to page 102 so we can get done here before lunch. Loan to value ratio. Look, simple formula there. You should be able to do these things in your head, but loan divided by the value is the loan to value ratio. And these formulas might become important to you, maybe come Sunday test time. 103, personal debt ratio. You guys should all be familiar with personal debt ratio because it's the same thing that applies when you're borrowing money to buy a single-family house, isn't it? It's the exact same thing, personal debt ratio. It applies on smaller commercial property loans. Will not apply on larger commercial property loans. And basically, it's there's two types of debt ratio. One is the debt ratio just using the principal and interest mortgage payment. And one is the debt ratio taking all of your monthly obligations and adding them to your principal and interest mortgage payment. There's a low-end and a high-end debt ratio. You want to add anything to that? Because nope. I don't need to spend any time on that one.
It rarely applies, honestly. I mean, typically we're just looking at the numbers of the project.
Okay.
I mean, unless it's a real small commercial deal where you're going to show some additional income to help support the debt coverage, that's really the only time it comes into play.
However, the next one on page 105 will always applies to income-producing property. So this one you sure better get because it is the factor that will determine how much you borrow. It's called debt coverage ratio. And in a nutshell, here's all it is, guys. You arrive at the net operating income of a project. The lender wants to know that the principal and interest payment is a little less than the net operating income of the project. I need to say that again. They want to know that the project's producing more net income than you're going to pay out for the debt. That's a reasonable request, isn't it? What do they call it when the opposite is true? They call it negative cash flow. Lenders frown on that negative cash flow stuff. Debt coverage ratio simply means what's the ratio of my net operating income to my outgoing debt? And it better be above 1. In other words, I need to collect more than 100% of my payment after all my expenses are paid. So when I'm looking for a 1.2 debt coverage ratio, that means that my net operating income has to be at least 120% of my mortgage payment. That clear? It better be. You don't want to miss this one. If I'm looking for a 1.2 debt ratio, it means that my net operating income will be 120% of my principal and interest payment. 1.2. 120%. I'm looking for a 1.1. What does that mean? 110%. All that means is that my income's got to be bigger than my outgo, and that's always a good thing to look for in any business. It's the chunka theory. As long as the chunka coming in is bigger than the chunka going out, you're okay. But there is no lender going to put a permanent loan on a project unless there's an immediate fix to the problem and they believe it, where the outgo is bigger than the income. What are they going to do? They're going to lower the loan. That's what they're going to do. They're going to lower the loan till the numbers work.
That's exactly what happens. I mean, basically, when somebody submits a loan proposal to us, we work the numbers. We'll submit it as, we'll modify the loan request and come back to you and say, you know what, you're wanting $400,000, but based on the cash flow that we see here, it looks like it's only going to be $350,000. Sometimes we'll go ahead and submit it at $400,000, knowing it's going to get kicked back. But our job is to be your advocate and to try and get you as much money as we can. So we may go ahead and submit it at $400,000, but then the lender's going to come back and they're going to go, you know what, based on the debt coverage ratio, the maximum that we can do on this property and this project is going to be $355,000. That's how it works. So
now, where are they getting them numbers from?
Counteroffer.
Where are they getting them from? They're getting them from the same paperwork that you should already know them before you submit the loan. But remember now, as we discussed yesterday or whenever, the net operating income is determined by using reality. And what do we got to have in there before we can get to reality? You want a replacement reserve, you want a vacancy factor, and you want a maintenance factor, and you want a management factor. This stuff that I'm going to manage it myself ain't going to fly. You got to put a management factor in there, regardless of whether it was in there when you bought the property or not. And if you don't put it in there, what are they going to do? They're going to stick it in there. They're going to get to the NOI, and then they're going to simply pull out a little calculator and figure out what they can loan you. It's not rocket science. So do your own calculations, and then when you apply for the loan and it looks like you know what you're talking about, then they're going to say, hey, they get it. Now all I got to do is approve it. And just for the record, should your property have at least a 1.2 debt coverage ratio? For your benefit. Forget the lender, for your benefit. You think? Yeah. Why do you think the lender wants you to collect more than you're paying out? It's called Murphy. Murphy's got an apartment in that project. And things never go the way they're supposed to go. So it's kind of a hedge factor. Anybody have any questions on debt coverage ratio? Well, what formula would I use to arrive at debt coverage ratio? Well,
I had one quick question.
All right.
What size loan, in general, for commercial lenders, does it get out of the kind of the personal range into the non-recourse size? So is it like a $1 million?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to.
It really depends on the lender and what they're comfortable with. Understand that a lender would prefer always to have your personal guarantee. So if they can get it, and again, everything's up for negotiating.
Yep.
Everything's up for negotiations. So they can ask for it. You can push back, and I've seen cases where the lender is willing to eliminate that clause from the contract. But most likely, unless they say it's non-recourse up front, they're going to ask for it, and it's up to you to push back and say, I would say up front, listen, I want a non-recourse loan, so you're not wasting anybody's time. But if you don't say that, they're going to ask for it, most likely.
You're going to have a lot easier time getting a non-recourse loan on income-producing projects I don't know what size. I would say they probably got to be at least over $1 million.
Yeah.
Anything less than that, maybe you get it, but I doubt it. And frankly, you may not get it at $1 million. You know, you're doing a $20 million project, it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. It's non-recourse if the property will support the debt. Now look at on page 106. There's your formula. Debt coverage ratio equals the net operating income divided by the debt service. It ain't that complicated. Now listen, remember, before you arrive at the net operating income, that does not include principal and interest payments, but it does include taxes and insurance. So make sure you don't get mixed up here. Net operating income has nothing to do with mortgage payment. Debt coverage ratio does include the mortgage payment. But don't include a PITI payment when taxes and insurance are already on your expense list. Don't double dip for taxes and insurance. Everybody understand what I just said? Yep. Okay, so you got to separate out the taxes and insurance from the payment to arrive at your net operating income as well as your DCR. Another point, all right, just for the record, if I got a 1.0 DCR, what does that mean? It means I'm breaking even. I'm breaking even. Okay? If I got a 0.95 DCR, what does that mean? It means I'm sucking wind. Yeah. I'm not collecting as much as I'm paying out. All right. So you guys get it? Now, it's not going to be difficult for you to process this, right? Now, that means all of you, right? Remember, the test is individual with no help and no open book. Now, of course, you know, I can't stop you from writing formulas on your hand and that kind of stuff, but just... All right. Loan to cost ratio. This is applicable when you're doing development stuff, whether you're building buildings or whether you're cutting up lots or whatever. Loan to cost ratio. Now, frankly, in today's market, it's quite common for a lender to loan you 100% of your cost. It goes from anywhere from 80 to 100% or 75 to 100% of your cost, but still they want it to be at a loan to value ratio that makes them feel comfortable. Does that make sense to you? Yes. Okay. So if I got a $10 million project, that's what it's worth when it's done. I'm doing a subdivision conversion. And it's going to cost me $7 million to develop it, and that includes the land. Maybe the lender will lend the $7 million, but they won't lend $8 million. Maybe they'll lend up to 100% of the cost. Maybe they'll only lend $6 million. But they're not going to exceed the loan-to-value ratio just the same. And they decide the loan-to-value ratio. In fact, let's talk about loan-to-value ratios with different types of loans. Apartment complexes, they still have a loan-to-value ratio even when you have the DCR involved. Do they not?
Yep.
What is it normally?
Typically, you're going to be looking at 80% on apartment units. The lower the loan-to-value, the lower the interest rate. The higher the loan-to-value, the higher the interest rate. You can assume that that's going to be the case across the board with any property type. There are some programs that will go to 90%. But there's stricter qualifications. They want to see a higher debt service.
So it's a hidden trap. You might be able to get the debt coverage ratio up to where they could loan you 95% of the value, 95%. But hey, if it exceeds their loan to value ratio, you're still limited. Whichever is lower is not whichever is higher. And if you know that loan to value ratio, you'll immediately know what your loan is if you know what your DCR is. I mean, if you know what your NOI is. All right. How about office buildings?
Really 80%. There's a couple of unique programs for, we have one program for medical and dental professionals that'll go 100%. So there's some unique scenarios out there.
Yep.
But for the most part,
they're actually loaning to the owner-occupant user.
They are, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're a practitioner and you want to buy the property you're in because you see the opportunity there, boy, how about no money down? That's a good deal.
If I were you, I'd figure 75% just for the safety of it. How about what else is there? Mobile home parks.
Mobile home parks usually 75, sometimes 80%. Same thing with retail, and it depends again. I mean, mobile home parks are a tricky one because oftentimes the debt service is, fairly low in mobile home parks, and then other times it's run really well and it's pretty high. As long as the DSCR is pretty good, then you can get up to 80%.
All right. So
retail as well, 80%.
Retail?
Often.
80%, yeah. I'd figure 75. In other words, I wouldn't want to do a deal where I had to have 80% to make any money. Remember, you got to make money with bad numbers. When the numbers get good, that's a bonus. And of course, you always expect them to get good, but you have to count on them not getting as good as you'd like. Loan to cost ratio. There's your formula. It's easy. Your loan divided by your total cost. Remember, project cost includes the land. Go ahead.
You talked about loan to value for everything except raw land. Do you have a feel?
Raw land's a tough one. Honestly, there's a huge spread. I mean, most conventional lenders don't want to lend more than 50% on raw land. There's some that'll go 60. I've seen some that'll go 70. But as a rule of thumb, you can assume that they don't like raw land. That's the least attractive category to a conventional lender.
I'd have to first ask you, why do you want to go get a permanent loan on raw land anyway? Because you see, if you get a permanent loan on raw land and you don't have immediate development in mind for that raw land, I mean, that's going to suck money out of you every single month to pay payments on something without income.
That's why the lenders don't like it. They want an asset that they can turn over, change the management if they need to. If they're taking back raw land, they got to find somebody else that's going to sit on raw land, rather than an office building or retail where they can hire a management company to improve the cash flow, and then they can sell off that appreciated asset.
So you can see, when you go to get a permanent loan on raw land, it's because the development is in process. So now you're getting a development loan on the raw land, and now the ratios fall right back into our situation here. It is a combination. They're making you a raw land loan, assuming you're developing it now, and they're releasing the funds as you develop it. And I'm going to tell you right now, they're not going to give you forever to develop it. You're going to give them a time frame, and if you don't meet that time frame, they're going to wonder what's going on here. And believe me, they're going to keep an eye on you, as I would if I were lending you the money as well. Yes.
Even though you hire a management company to run the project, how much weight, or do they put weight on any kind of experience that you have?
They'll factor that in, but they don't really care about your experience as much as the numbers. I mean, they want to see the numbers of the project. Now, granted, if you've got a good resume, if you've managed property before, if you've been doing commercial for a while, that absolutely helps, and that can be a compensating factor that can help overlook a low debt coverage ratio, especially in a purchase. If you're buying a property that's not doing so well financially, but you've got a lot of experience in the past, they're certainly going to understand that, hey, this guy's going to take this property, he's going to improve the cash flow. But understand one thing about lenders, especially traditional commercial lenders, they get their money from somewhere. Okay, oftentimes it's government-backed programs or pensions. I mean, there's a variety of different funding sources. When they borrow that money, because that's typically what they're doing, they have caveats in there where they have to lend according to certain guidelines. They really can't go out of that box, even if they want to. Sometimes it's federally restricted, and they can't go outside of specific guidelines. So, don't blame the banker. Oftentimes, it's not their fault. They really don't have any control over it.
We got to blame somebody.
Blame the broker.
A commercial real estate broker sent over some financial information to me on a property, and he's really complete with cap rates and price per square foot. And there's something on here called a GRM, which he said was gross rent multiplier. Do you ever use that? Is that worthless, or
only when you're selling?
Okay.
Gross rent multiplier helps you determine the value, the sales price.
Gross rent multiplier gets you into a trap. And if I were you, I'd ignore it. I mean, it's a huge trap. You use a gross rent multiplier to try to determine the value of the property without giving any consideration to the expenses. I mean, to me, that's ludicrous. That's like realtors using an average value. Well, who wants to use an average value? I want to know what the high value is, because I want mine up there. I don't want it down here at average.
Well, the high value is what helps bring that average up over time. That's what causes the appreciation. As people sell at that high value, it keeps moving up.
But when a realtor uses an average value to determine the market value of a house, I mean, that's crazy.
It's not my
I don't know where they come up with these things. Back in the past, they used to use gross rent multipliers, but understand that the term gross. You know, it don't make much difference what it's grossing if it's netting zero. So if it's grossing a bunch and netting zero, what's it worth? I mean, not much. But if it's grossing a bunch and netting a bunch, it's worth a lot more. So I would not. The realtor wants you to look at the gross rent multiplier because he thinks you're a dumb doctor. Remember, it's great when you sell. It's not great when you buy.
One quick question. How many people are looking at doing development or construction loans? Can I see a show of hands? Okay. We have a construction cost spreadsheet that I'll also include in that email so that you've got a formula that you can make sure you plug in. Hey,
what a guy.
I'm a giver.
Yeah. I might have to rethink having you back. All right. Next page, an operating expense ratio. Okay. All this is a warning to you that you might want to take a look at the expenses and use a little bit of reality here before you go submit them to a lender and expect them to believe whatever you put down on a piece of paper. There are ratios that a lender is going to look at, and on both sides of the sword. For example, if your apartment project has got 50% expenses, if 50% of its income is going into expenses, you've got a very high expense factor there, and the lender's going to want to know how come the expenses are so high. On the other hand, you got a project that's got 20% expenses. They're not going to believe that either. They're going to say you're fudging the factors because you don't operate an apartment complex on 20% expenses. What's wrong? What have you left out? Now we got to go do the work. Now we got to make up the numbers. You're going to be somewhere in the range of 20 to 40%. And if you're not, you better be asking yourself why. You guys understand what that means? You got income of $100,000. It's going to cost you $20,000 to $40,000 a year to operate that, excluding debt service. See, debt service is one of your biggest expenses. So, what I would do is I would ask the broker, what is a tolerable operating expense ratio that lenders are looking for now? And so we're going to ask the broker and see if he knows the answer.
I'm sorry.
Since he's so segregated from these loans personally, he probably doesn't know the answer.
You may be right about that. Well, I'm sorry. What was the question?
Operating expense, let's say on an apartment complex or an office building, what percent of the gross, I already asked you this, but you gave me a wrong answer. What percent of the gross?
I'd say about 40%.
You would? Because it's in the book. Right. Good. All right. You know what? It really depends on what the lender wants to see, and it also is adjustable with the times. It fluctuates from time to time. So anyway, if you're operating a building at 40%, you're probably okay. If you're operating at too much less than that, something's wrong. If you're operating more than that, you need to lower the expenses or raise the income. And in fact, on the fourth day, we're going to talk about how to increase the value of properties, which is where you build in your equity.